Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to do a February book haul. These are all the books I brought into my library in the month of February, and all book hauls are exciting because if you bring a book into your library, odds are you're hopefully excited about it. But this is particularly exciting because I really like the books that I brought into my library, but also I've already read two of them, and I can't wait to talk about them. So let's get going. But before we do, I will mention that there are affiliate links to each of these books on bookshop.org, except for two of them. Two of them have only been released in the UK, so there will not be affiliate links for them down below. I'll talk about those when we get around to them. But if you use those affiliate links on bookshop.org, you help me and my channel out. Otherwise, you can shop at your local independent bookstore or request these titles at your library, because supporting your local library is a good thing to do. So let's jump in and start talking about the books I got in February. The first is one of the biggest releases of 2024 so far. It is published by Knopf, and it is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. I have heard so many good things about this book. I'm really excited to read it. I had been thinking about diving in now, but I'm catching up on some books that I want to read before the Pulitzer Prize is announced, things that had been published last year. Otherwise, I probably would be reading this right now. But I'm so excited. I've heard so many good things, and you've probably heard about this book yourself because it feels like it has been everywhere, on social media, on BookTube, online, just everywhere. Here is what this book is about, according to the description. Cyrus Shams, the novel's hero, is a young man grappling with an inheritance of violence and loss. A mother whose plane was shot down over the skies of the Persian Gulf in a senseless accident, and a father whose life in America was circumscribed by killing chickens on a factory farm in the Midwest. Cyrus is a drunk, an addict, and a poet whose obsession with martyrs leads him into the mysteries of the past, toward an uncle who rode through Iranian battlefields dressed as the angel of death to inspire and comfort the dying, and toward his mother through a painting discovered in a Brooklyn art gallery that suggests she might not have been who or what she seemed. Cyrus is guided on his journey by the voices of artists, poets, and kings, and delivered in the novel's unforgettable final pages to a world that teems with unforeseen wonders. Again, I've heard so many really good things about this book, so I'm really curious to get to it myself. In all of my book hauls, I like to read a little bit from the opening of the book. So here is the opening of Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. Cyrus Shams, Keady University, 2015. Maybe it was that Cyrus had done the wrong drugs in the right order, or the right drugs in the wrong order. But when God finally spoke back to him after 27 years of silence, what Cyrus wanted more than anything else was a do-over. That actually feels like a good stopping point. That's a really good tease and a very interesting opening to, again, definitely one of the biggest books of 2024 so far. It would be really interesting to see if this book has legs throughout the year. So if it pops up come Booker season, book prize season, like National Book Award season, or when we get to end of year best lists. It feels like this is a book that's destined to pop up again on those, but the year is young. So it'll be really interesting to see if it stays in the conversation. I feel like it will, but we will find out. Then we have One Love by Matt Cain. This is one of the two that I have already read, and this is also one of the two that is only available in the UK. If you follow along, you know that I'm a huge Matt Cain fan, and my husband Joel is a huge Matt Cain fan. We were gifted the book The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle by Erica from the Broken Spine in conjunction with Montana Book Company, and just absolutely loved it. It was one of those cases of the right book at the right time. I have it faced out on my bookshelf right there, as you can see. And it was just perfect. You know, Joel and I were going through a tough spot with grief, and it really helped us get out and to the other side. And then when Matt Cain released a new book last year called Becoming Ted, which is next to The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle on my shelf, we did not have the patience to wait to see if it was released in the United States. Ultimately, it will be. It will be released here, I think, in June. But we ordered a copy from the UK, and we did the same with One Love by Matt Cain. We pre-ordered it from Gaze the Word, which is a fantastic independent bookstore in London that you can guess specializes in books by queer authors and about queer things. This is published by, there's just an H on the side. It is published by H Review. So there's that. And this, like I said, this is something I've already read. I can't wait to talk about it because I actually finished it this past week as I am filming this, and I haven't filmed my Friday reads, but you'll actually get my Friday reads before you get this video. Time means nothing on the internet. But I really enjoyed it. I will say that. This was a fantastic book. And the good news is, if you live in the United States, you don't have to wait a year. You can order it from the UK. If you live in the UK, it's readily available. You know, it's just very possible. Or, you know, you can wait. There is a bookmark in here that I keep swishing around because Joel is actually about to start this book now that I have finished. And I can't wait to talk to him about this book because I have been trying not to spoil anything for him. And since I have already read it, I'm not going to rely on the description that is in the flap. I will say that this is the story of Guy and Danny. It goes back and forth between the present, I use quotation marks because the present is 2022, and 2002. So Danny and Guy meet in 2002 when they both start at university in Manchester. And they are both gay and have not really come out, so they find courage with each other. They're both using college as an excuse to get out and explore their lives as gay men. They meet on the first day that they arrive on campus, and they start sort of tentatively stepping out into Manchester's queer neighborhood and form a friendship that exists for the next 20 years. So in the present, again, present meaning because it's 2022, Danny has decided that he is going to tell Guy that he has been in love with him for the whole 20 years that they have been friends, and they are getting back together to go to Manchester Pride. They have not been really back to Manchester since they graduated from college. So in the 2022 storyline, you have Danny and Guy back in Manchester where they had gone to college and where they had met, and Danny wants to unload this secret and you don't really know what's going to happen. And then in the other alternating chapters, you move forward in time starting in 2002 and working your way up to the present, again, the present being 2022. I really enjoyed this book. Ultimately, it feels like it is a rom-com and a romance, but ultimately it is mostly about the importance of loving yourself and the damage that comes from not being allowed to be yourself and being afraid of being judged for who you are. And I thought it was incredibly, incredibly powerful. And I would definitely recommend it. I'm just a huge fan of Matt Cain. Because we had pre-ordered it at Gaze the Word, we got a signed copy of it. And here is how One Love opens. It starts with a prologue in 2002, but lately I've been sticking with the actual first chapter and not the prologue. So we start on Friday in 2022. Danny stands on the concourse of Euston Station and draws in slow, steady breaths. As he catches sight of Guy, a mixture of excitement and fear live wires through his body. He tries to compose himself. He sees that Guy is wearing a bicep-revealing short-sleeved shirt with khaki shorts and brown loafers, and he's looking every bit as handsome as he did on the day Danny first met him. And let's stop there. That's One Love by Matt Cain. Really a fantastic book. Even though I don't have an affiliate link for this down below, I would recommend that you seek out a copy because I thought it was just a joy. Total cinnamon bun, empowering goodness, and I really liked it. And since we're talking about books that are only available in the UK right now and books that I have already read, let's talk about One Last Song by Nathan Evans. This is also only available in the UK, and I actually just finished it last night as I am filming this. It's a tiny little thing. You could dunk it in your coffee. It is, I think, 154 pages. It's a pretty quick read. I admit the jacket design and the blurb had kind of made me think that this was going to be a little more on the comedic side, a little bit lighter and fluffier. It was surprisingly serious, but I actually really appreciated that. So this is published by Incandescent. And again, since I've read it, I'm not going to rely on the description on the book. I will just tell you that this is about a man whose name is John, but he goes by Joan. He is being put into a care home in the UK. And when he arrives, he meets other residents, and one of the other residents is a man named Jim. And they embark on a relationship together, and it was sort of inspired by the Grey Liberation, which I think was a documentary in the UK about the generation of gay men who had been taking part in Stonewall as they get older and the problems they face in care homes and things like that. So you can see some of the things because, of course, in this care home, they face prejudice from other members of the home and from the people who are supposed to be caring for them. And it's a really interesting and nuanced story, and another one that I would really recommend. Again, it's really tiny, so it would be well worth your time. And it was really endearing, and I enjoyed it. Bob the Bookerer has talked about it as well on his channel. I actually discovered this book because of Bob the Bookerer and immediately had to order a copy from the UK. It's nice to live in an age where you don't have to wait for things to be available in the US. You can order them from the UK as you see fit, because I'm really glad that I got a copy of this book, and I'm really glad that I read it. I think I'm going to be thinking about it for a good long time. Here is how One Last Song opens. It begins with a chapter from Joan. They alternate between Joan and Jim. Well, get her. Hair to shoulder, legs forever, precipitous platforms, and a placard proclaiming gay liberation. Of course, my hair was hennaed. Can't tell from this picture. Black and white. Gray, really, beneath the patina of soot. I give it a wipe, take a better look. And what a looker I was. Not that I could see it then. That jawline, the denim, looks like it's been painted on. Must have been, what, 71? No, 72. The first London Pride demonstration, when it was still a demonstration, when I was still a young man. That is One Last Song by Nathan Evans, another book that I have already read and would definitely recommend to you if you are thinking about bringing it into your own library. Then, if you follow along, you know I'm also a fan of Abdi Nazemian. You can see Like a Love Song faced out on my bookshelf right there. Only This Beautiful Moment is this green book next to it on the shelf. I loved both of those books. Like a Love Story was one of my favorite books in the year in which I read that, and Only This Beautiful Moment was one of my favorite books of last year. I have been keeping an eye out for other Abdi Nazemian books at my local used bookstore ever since, and one finally showed up, The Authentics. Not the one I was kind of looking for, but definitely one that sounds interesting, and I'm really looking forward to reading. And actually, I found it on Valentine's Day, and it has a very Valentine's Day appropriate cover, so it felt like the universe was sending me a Valentine's Day gift. So there you go. This is published by Balzer and Bray. Here is the description of the book. Daria Esfandiar is Iranian-American and fiercely proud of her heritage, unlike some of the nose jobs in the clique led by her former best friend, Heidi Javadi. Daria and her friends call themselves the Authentics because they pride themselves on always keeping it real. But in the course of researching a school project, Daria learns something shocking about her past, which launches her on a journey of self-discovery. It seems everyone is keeping secrets, and it's getting harder to know who she even is any longer. With infighting among the Authentics, her mother planning an over-the-top Sweet 16 party, and a romance that should be totally off-limits, Daria doesn't have time for this identity crisis. Really looking forward to it. A lot of that stuff sounds like it is perfectly in Abdi Nazemian's wheelhouse. Reminds me of a lot of the things that happen in both of the other books, but I'm sure this will be a very different take on those topics. Really looking forward to reading this at some point. Let us do a bit from the opening. Chapter 1. When you look up at the sky in Los Angeles, all you see is a strange film of smog, like the whole city is filtered through the lens of your dirtiest sunglasses. You can't see any stars, and if you're really unlucky, there's a blimp up there writing the words, "Happy Birthday, Heidi," in the sky in pink. Yes, with 16 exclamation points, one for every year of my former best friend, Heidi Javadi's life. That is the opening of The Authentics by Abdi Nazemian. Really looking forward to that because he's an author that I have just really enjoyed. An author I have not read yet, but I'm pretty convinced I will enjoy, is Edward P. Jones. Edward P. Jones is in the Pulitzer Prize family of authors. He won a Pulitzer Prize for The Known World, which is a book that I have not read yet. And so many people have told me that they loved that I'm almost nervous at this point because I feel like I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself to like that book. I believe this story collection, All Anne Hagar's Children, is the only book he has published since he won the Pulitzer Prize for The Known World. And I have heard really great things about both books, mostly about The Known World because it's the Pulitzer book. So it is sort of top of mind for people most. But I've heard really great things about All Anne Hagar's Children as well. It's sort of just bubbling around as in the years since it was originally published. And I had added it to my used book wish list, and Joel actually found a copy in his travels for work and brought it home for me. This is published by Amistad, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, and here is the description. In 14 sweeping and sublime stories, 5 of which have been published in the New Yorker, the best-selling and Pulitzer Prize-winning author of The Known World shows that his grasp of the human condition is firmer than ever. Returning to the city that inspired his first prize-winning book, Lost in the City, Jones has filled this new collection with people who call Washington, D.C. home. Yet it is not the city's power brokers that most concern him, but rather its ordinary citizens. All Aunt Hagar's Children turns an unflinching eye to the men, women, and children caught between the old ways of the South and the temptations that await them further north. People who, in Jones' masterful hands, emerge as fully human and morally complex, whether they are country folk used to getting up with the chickens or people with centuries of education behind them. In the title story, in which Jones employs the first-person rhythms of a classic detective story, a Korean War veteran investigates the death of a family friend whose sorry destiny seems inextricable from his mother's own violent Southern childhood. In the blink of a god's eye and Tapestry, newly married couples leave behind the familiarity of rural life to pursue lives of urban promise, only to be challenged and disappointed. With the legacy of slavery just a stone's throw away and future uncertain, Jones's cornucopia of characters will haunt readers for years to come. So in the case of a story collection, obviously I read a bit from the first story in the collection, and in that case, this is In the Blink of God's Eye. That 1901 winter, when the wife and her husband were still new to Washington, there came to the wife, like a scent carried on the wind, some word that wolves roamed the streets and roads of the city after sundown. The wife, Ruth Patterson, knew what wolves could do. She had an uncle who went to Alaska in 1895 to hunt for gold, an uncle who was devoured by wolves not long after he slept under his first Alaskan moon. Still, the night, even in God-forsaken Washington, sometimes had that old song that could pull Ruth up and out of her bed, the way it did when she was a girl across the Potomac River in Virginia, where all was safe and all was family. That is the opening of All Aunt Hagar's Children by Edward P. Jones, an author I'm really hoping to get to soon. I will probably start with this one and then work my way up to The Known World, because when I do read The Known World for my Pulitzer Prize project, I'm trying to read every book that has won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction. It will be helpful to me to have read this book, even though it was published after. It gives me a sense of Edward P. Jones, so when I do the project, I will have a deeper understanding of who he is as an author and the legacy that he has had since he won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction. I am going to be utilizing my laptop here, so I'm just making sure I'm on the right page, because the next book is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. And this edition that I just found at my local used bookstore this week, as I'm filming this, does not have a description, so I'm going to rely on the one that is online. Basically, I have talked a lot about how I don't really like the current state of the mystery and thriller genre. I don't really like what it is. I prefer a classic whodunit, and to me, the sort of queen of that is Agatha Christie. She's not without being problematic. She's very hit or miss. There are good ones and there are bad ones, for sure. I'm actually not a fan of Murder on the Orient Express, for example. I'm not a huge fan of Hercule Poirot, and this is a Hercule Poirot book, so, you know, it'll be interesting to see. But I have heard from a lot of people that the best Agatha Christie book is actually The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which is one that I have not read. So I had been keeping an eye out at my local used bookstore for a copy to show up, because usually when an Agatha Christie book shows up, it disappears very quickly. Well, luckily this week they had a bunch of these Agatha Christie Mystery Collection editions show up. And I went with this one because they had Murder on the Orient Express, which again, I'm not a huge fan of. They did have And Then There Were None, but I already have a copy of that. And I decided not to spend the money on a new copy of that. I figured I would just grab the one that I should try. So here is the description of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. The story that made Agatha Christie famous ends with one of her most dramatic twists. The villagers of King's Abbot are shocked when a wealthy local widow commits suicide, and the very next day her fiancé, Roger Ackroyd, is stabbed to death. Dr. James Shepherd, the local physician, discovers the body of his friend and narrates the ensuing hunt for the killer. All the guests and staff at Ackroyd's country house seem to have solid alibis, except for his missing stepson. But as the authorities home in on their most obvious suspect, the recently retired detective Hercule Poirot unexpectedly turns up and joins the fray. Dr. Shepherd gamely assists the legendary Poirot as he untangles one of the most fiendish mysteries in Christie's extensive oeuvre. And here is how The Murder of Roger Ackroyd begins. Lovely little end papers. Just a fun little detail. This is published by Bantam, by the way, I should say. Oh, it opens with a cast of characters. We love that. Chapter 1, Dr. Shepherd at the breakfast table. Mrs. Ferris died on the night of the 16th to 17th September, a Thursday. I was sent for at 8 o'clock on the morning of Friday the 17th. There was nothing to be done. She had been dead some hours. That's the opening of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. Classic mystery whodunit, and I tend to like those. So next, we have someone else who is in the Pulitzer Prize family of authors, Larry McMurtry. This is Horsemen Pass By. I believe this was actually his, if not his first book, it was close to it. It doesn't actually say, oh yeah, Larry McMurtry's stunning first novel, Horsemen Pass By. This was adapted into the movie HUD with Paul Newman. So if you have seen that, you kind of know what this is right away. I read and loved Lonesome Dove. It was actually the very first book that I read for my Pulitzer Prize project. I will link the video that I did about that book down below because I'm a big fan of it, and I would encourage you to read it, even though it's a brick of a book, but it reads really well. Larry McMurtry is a born storyteller, and Lonesome Dove bears that out. I have a couple of other McMurtry books. They're right here on the shelf. And there are actually two editions of Horsemen Pass By. The newest one is actually really attractive. It looks really nice. I went with this one because it matches the other two books that I have on my shelf, which are The Last Picture Show and Terms of Endearment. Really excited about this. And I kind of love these older vintage looking paperbacks. So if you're unfamiliar, here is what Horsemen Pass By is about. The youngest hand on his granddad's cattle ranch, Lonnie, idolizes HUD, a wild-acting man who can get more women than anybody, who will do anything he wants to, whether it hurts someone or not. Only two folks don't bow to the force of HUD's personality, Homer Bannon and the woman Halmea. When he tries to conquer them too, nothing will ever be the same. This elegiac tale of youth edging toward manhood and the barbed and sweet bonds of love and kinship 20 miles from the lights of the nearest town is peopled by characters no reader will soon forget, and marked by the vivid storytelling and deep sympathy that illumine every novel by Larry McMurtry. I've been wanting to read more by him ever since I read Lonesome Dove, so I think Last Picture Show would probably be the one that I would do first, and then Horsemen Pass By is right on the heels of that. And it begins with a prologue, so we're going to skip to the first chapter. For dessert that night, Halmea made a big freezer full of peach ice cream, rich as Jersey milk and thick with hunks of sweet locker plant Albertas. It had for me the good special flavor of something seasonal, something you have waited all winter to taste, like early roasting ears or garden tomatoes. I ate 3 big helpings and still couldn't get enough. When the freezer was almost empty, I went in to get the dasher, but HUD shoved me out of the way and took it himself. We dished the last peachy drops of cream and took our bowls out on the porch to scrape them dry. That is the opening of Horsemen Pass By Larry McMurtry. The final book in this book haul for February is another Pulitzer family of authors writer. It's Delta Wedding by Eudora Welty. Eudora Welty won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction for The Optimist's Daughter, which is another book that I have not read yet. And similar to Edward P. Jones, I think I would want to read Delta Wedding first. And I think she won for The Optimist's Daughter, which is a book that I've heard really good things about, but Delta Wedding feels like the book that she is most known for, so I feel like it would be helpful to have read this when I go into The Optimist's Daughter. So both All Anne Hagar's Children and Delta Wedding feel like addendums to my Pulitzer Prize project. They are sort of hoops that I want to jump through in order to get to that part of my Pulitzer Prize project. And this is a really beautiful edition that showed up in my local used bookstore. It's from Apollo. It's just a beautiful sort of vintage photo of a house that wraps around onto the spine, which I really enjoy, and actually even wraps around to the back of the book. And that photo is repeated on the end papers, which is kind of lovely. I just think that's really beautifully put together. Here's what this is about. Laura McRaven travels down the Delta to attend her cousin Dabney's wedding. At the Fairchild Plantation, her family envelop her in a tidal wave of warmth, teases, and comfort. As the big day approaches, tensions inevitably rise to the surface. Revelation leads to revelation, and little Laura finally finds a place of her own within her clannish, proud, quarrelsome, and loving Southern family. And it doesn't say there, but Laura is a child. I think when I first read that description, I had the impression that Laura was either a teenager or a young woman, but she is actually a child. And I've heard really great things about this book and Eudora Welty, so I'm really looking forward to reading this, hopefully at some point soon. there's an introduction. So let's jump to the first chapter and I'll read a little bit from the beginning of Delta Wedding by Eudora Welty. The nickname of the train was the Yellow Dog. Its real name was the Yazoo Delta. It was a mixed train. The day was the 10th of September, 1923, afternoon. Laura McRaven, who was 9 years old, was on her first journey alone. She was going up from Jackson to visit her mother's people, the Fairchilds, at their plantation named Shell Mound at Fairchilds, Mississippi. When she got there, poor little Laura, little motherless girl, they would all run out and say, for her mother had died in the winter, and they had not seen Laura since the funeral. Her father had come as far as Yazoo City with her and put her on the dog. Her cousin Dabney Fairchild, who was 17, was going to be married, but Laura could not be in the wedding for the reason that her mother was dead. Of these facts, the one most persistent in Laura's mind was the most intimate one, that her age was 9. That is a really powerful first paragraph and makes me think that I should probably get to this. I have a lot of things on my plate through May because I want to do some reading to catch up on books that could potentially win the Pulitzer Prize. I want to read some Irish and Scottish authors before I go to Ireland and Scotland in May. And when I get back, I feel like this is a prime candidate for to read. Well, then in June, I read LGBTQ plus books for Pride Month. So starting in July, this is a prime candidate for my pile of possibilities to get to because it just sounds really good. And that is a great first paragraph. So those are the books that I brought into my library in the month of February. I would love to hear what you think about any of them. If you have recommendations based on my interest in any of these books, I would love to hear it in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time and I will be back until next time. Happy reading.